Good morning. This is Kevin Smith, Research Alliance Manager with the REL Southeast. We are so looking forward to sharing with you today this webinar on building capacity through researcher-practitioner partnerships. This specific webinar was created and is being distributed through the Improving Literacy Research Alliance with the REL Southeast. As I mentioned, my name is Kevin Smith. I'm the Research Alliance Manager here and just wanted to put a picture up so you can put a name with a face. But I definitely look forward to sharing with you as we move forward throughout the presentation. I wanted to mention that this specific presentation is going to talk about strategies that were used for content area reading intervention, and wanted to mention that their inclusion is not intended as an endorsement by the REL Southeast or IES. State and local programs may use any instructional content, achievement system, or assessments, curriculum, or program of instruction that they wish. So our goals for today are first to provide a brief overview of the REL program in general and the REL Southeast in specific. Then we're going to learn about capacity building through researcher-practitioner partnerships by exploring a specific example from the Improving Literacy Alliance that's technical support for content area reading intervention. It was a project conducted by the REL Southeast through the Improving Literacy Research Alliance. Our next goal is to engage in a question and answer session about capacity building through research practitioner partnerships. You have the chat system that's available for you on this webinar. We did put up a prompt. If you want to note your name, organization, and location, feel free to do that. It's not required, but if you'd like to, it'd be great. We do want to try to make this as engaging and interactive as we can, so if you have questions all along the way, feel free to type them in the chat box. Just send to all participants. If you have a separate conversation you'd like to strike up with one of the other participants, feel free to do so. If you have questions you want to ask of anyone, and there are video clips of different people who have multiple involvements in this project, feel free to send questions out. We'll be more than happy to try to respond to your questions at the end. We have a Q&A session that's embedded in this presentation, but we also want you to feel free to engage with other participants and chat with them about any questions or thoughts that come out throughout the webinar. So just wanted to note that, again, feel free to use that chat box. There's an icon for chat that's at the top right, and you can just type in at the box below and it says send to all participants. And again, we'll be glad to have you engage in interactive conversations through the chat feature or answer any questions that you may have. Okay, and finally, we'd like to solicit your feedback on this workshop. As soon as the webinar is complete, you will be directed to a survey immediately following the workshop. So as soon as the webinar is over, again, you'll go straight to a survey if you'd like to complete that. We'd love to get feedback on our events so that we can work to and strive to make them as helpful as they can be for our participants in the future. A little bit about the REL program in general. There are 10 RELs across the United States. They're funded through the Institute of Education Sciences, which is the research arm of the U.S. Department of Education. And our specific region is the Southeast, which I'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. So the 6 states that we work with at the REL Southeast are North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi. This specific project occurred with a school district in Florida and with interest with Alliance members from across Florida, but we also have wonderful Alliance members in each of our member states for improving literacy, so I just wanted to mention that. So the REL program overview for this cycle was to establish priority areas within each region by speaking with state and local leaders to determine what their educational research needs were and their priorities were. And then, of course, to provide access to high-quality, scientifically valid educational research through multiple different ways. And actually, the project that we're going to speak about today, it really overlaps many of these areas. Okay, the RELs are charged specifically with building capacity of state and district educators and policymakers to use data and research to improve student outcomes. And this project in particular is focused on capacity building because we didn't actually conduct a research project. We work with a district to help them conduct their own research project, and we'll talk about that as we go through. So one important feature of the REL program is this focus on researcher-practitioner partnerships. And we have a wonderful cross-REL working group where all the RELs get together and talk about how to support research alliances And this invitation was shared with this Crosswell group as well. So working within their RELs, the Alliance members work to identify the challenges that they're facing in their state and their district and their schools and try to come up with solutions from an evidence base or working with researchers to see how they might address specific challenges they face. So this webinar is going to look at one of those specific challenges that a district faced and how we were able to support them in building capacity to meet that challenge. But it also, as we go through this, I want you to think about this in a broader context, and this may be a good way to build a partnership with a state or a district and look at specific problems they have through a partnership and how you may be able to work together with researchers and practitioners to address the challenges that you face. So when we talked about the priority areas for this region with our state and local leaders, we came up with 8 significant priority areas that we were asked to work specifically with in and around the region. And those 8 are listed here. I won't go into a lot of detail. We have a lot of wonderful Research Alliance managers and members who are working in each of these areas. And as I mentioned, they were created to address regional priorities, and really the Research Alliances build these partnerships that we're going to focus on today. And as I said, we're going to talk about a specific example, but we have these same kinds of projects and partnerships that occur across each of these alliances. So I just want to, again, highlight the fact that while we're going to talk about one specific example, I'd like you to think about this in a broader context. So these kind of projects happen not only in the specific example that we have with the Improving Literacy Alliance, but we have other projects with the Improving Literacy Alliance that are just as engaging, and we've built capacity, and we may do similar workshops around those projects in the coming year with that alliance and with the others. So just wanted to mention, again, thinking about this in a broader context. So with the Improving Literacy Research Alliance, we have representatives across state in state education agencies and each of the 6 state education agencies that we work with nonprofit institutions such as Big Bend of the United Way, the Learning Alliance, and others that focus on working to improve literacy, local education agencies such as the school district that we're going to speak about today and other school districts across our region, and universities. We have several faculty members from universities who are in this alliance as well. So some of the significant successes of this specific alliance, other than the project I'm going to share today, we've had several cross-state presentations. We have some similar literacy policies that are being moving forward in our states that we've been able to help support, and we've been able to bring people together to talk about and to share resources to help support new literacy policies or improvement in the implementation of literacy policies within states and districts. Then, of course, we've developed several products, and we've worked with our alliance to develop several products that hopefully everyone will find beneficial in supporting literacy policies across the state, and our alliance members have played a wonderful role in reviewing these documents and in even helping to write them and providing guidance as we're writing documents and tools and research reports that will help share ways that literacy policies may be addressed or how they're working in the states. So this was a wonderful quote that was from Dr. Foreman, our director, who's been engaged in researcher-practitioner partnerships for decades. And she feels that, and others have felt the same way, that partnerships really have to be mutually beneficial if they're going to be formed and specifically if they're going to be sustained, that it can't be one-sided. And that's going to shine through in many of the video clips that I have from the folks who worked on this project. The fact is there was benefit from both the research side and from the practitioner side. Everyone found benefit, and they were able to help both sides and really conducting work that was beneficial for everyone. So with this, I'm going to start talking specifically about this project with a video clip from the superintendent of Seminole County Public Schools, Dr. Walter Griffin, and he's going to give a great district overview of this project. But before he does, I did want to mention he's going to give a few acronyms that I want to define before he starts speaking, because I know you're not all familiar with this project. Seminole County Public Schools, and this will come up later, but I want to give a very brief overview of this now, wanted to start providing content area reading intervention for their students. And this is in lieu of a required standalone course that students would take. So some of the terms that Dr. Griffin's going to mention are NG-CARPD, and that stands for Next Generation Content Area Reading Professional Development. and CARPD, which is Content Area Reading Professional Development, which is the shortened version of that same acronym. And that's a professional development suite that was developed by the Florida Department of Education that districts could use to help train teachers in providing content area reading intervention strategies that would benefit their students in content area courses. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Griffin.
Hello, I'm Walt Griffin, Superintendent of Seminole County Public Schools, and I am so pleased to talk to you about our NG CARPD program. I have a passion to make sure that students find their pathways and go into areas that they're interested in. And we were finding that a lot of our students, because they needed reading remediation, were being tied up for 5, 6, 7, and 8 years, spending most of the days in reading and math remediation. So we worked with REL to see if there was a way for us to train our teachers and support our students to give them options other than just sitting in a traditional reading class day after day. And the outcome was great. We got teachers who received their NG CARPD certification. Our students now go to those classes, which they'd have to go to anyway, and it frees them up for a period or two to take electives and classes that they want. We have seen a steady increase in our graduation rate among our most at-risk students, and I attribute this to be one of the reasons that our students are staying in school. I'm really looking forward. REL is going through to do some research to see how these students are continuing to perform, and hopefully we can grow this program in Seminole County. Thank you.
All right, and thanks to Dr. Griffin for giving a great explanation and overview of this project. I did want to make a quick reminder, feel free to use that chat box if you have questions or would like to interact with other participants. Again, we want to make that available. You're not required to, but I do as a former teacher. Always love to see students engaged and participants engaged, so if you'd like to use that chat feature, please feel free to. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so a little bit about this initiative. I just wanted to give a quick overview. So this specific project, as I mentioned, is a project that Seminole County Public Schools contacted the REL Southeast about to help support. And it involves training coaches to provide professional development for teachers in the district. And those teachers receive training. They receive knowledge about content area reading intervention strategies, and the district goes in through coaches and through district staff and performs observations to see how the strategies are being implemented in the classroom. All of this work and training and professional development is occurring to help provide support to students who have scored, and Dr. Cody, who's the assistant superintendent, will speak about this in a second, but support students who are just below the proficiency level on the state reading outcome. So that's the purpose of the training program and the project that Seminole County wanted to work through and provide support from the REL Southeast for. So it's a little bit of big picture overview of this project. Okay, and this is a timeline, and I wanted to mention that we worked with the district to develop a timeline as we were beginning this project. And if you have a similar project, it may be helpful to develop a timeline like this to look at exactly how the partnership is going to work, specifically what activities might occur between the researchers and the practitioners to start setting up meeting dates and times, and just think about sequentially what that project might look like over time. So again, this is a format that we developed, and we created a graphic afterward. I do want to note that this was not created prior to the project, but the idea was, and the timeline for when the project would entail is one of the first things that we developed. So I just wanted to share a little bit with you that this is something that you may find beneficial. Okay, so I'm going to get in more detail about each of these specific activities that occurred. So at our very first Improving Literacy Research Alliance meeting back in 2012, our Alliance members expressed great interest in exploring the feasibility of this state-approved option of providing content area reading intervention for middle and high school students that were required by statute to receive reading intervention. So that was one of the first questions that came up with our Alliance. We have many members in Florida at that point. As a matter of fact, it was Florida exclusive when we first started it. And many of our districts really wanted to know in Florida, how can we do this? Will it really work? So this is a question that came up at our very first meeting. There was a lot of interest across our Alliance members. So we knew going into this, even before we started this project, that it's something the Alliance was interested in. And that's something I want to bring up, is the fact that this project was really driven by Alliance members and not by the researchers. We took an idea they had that they wanted to explore, and work with them to develop this partnership with a single district to create something that might be beneficial across other districts in the state and even the region. Okay, so in 2013-14, after our alliance was firmly established, one of our alliance members, Dr. Anna Marie Cody, she started conversations with REL Southeast staff because she wanted to see, we really want to start this content area reading intervention. We've got interest at the district level, as you heard Dr. Griffin say. We have principals who really think this would be a good idea, but we want to make sure that it's going to go smoothly. We want to start with a pilot and see, make sure it's going to work well before we roll on a large scale. So she contacted us, and we started setting up some brainstorming meetings to set up a feasibility pilot and started having those kind of conversations that really started to develop this partnership, bring the right people on board and to the table to see how can this work, what do we need to consider, what are some areas through your work as researchers that we really need to think about before we start a pilot like this. So now we're going to hear a little bit from Dr. Cody, again, Deputy Superintendent of Instructional Excellence and Equity for Seminole County Public Schools. She's going to talk a little bit about her thoughts about the partnership and then a little bit of an overview of the program as well.
The content area reading pilot was designed to ensure that we were using our resources as wisely as possible, trying to help students improve their literacy acquisition. We started by identifying a population of students who were almost at a proficiency level and made sure that they had an opportunity to be served by CAR-PD trained teachers. We included a student intervention component as well. We used a computer-based program to help them practice their literacy skills. And the students were able to identify an additional elective in their schedule because they were with the CAR-PD trained teachers instead of in a self-contained reading intervention class. We contacted REL Southeast because we needed expertise to figure out whether or not this intervention really made a difference to the students that we selected. We had internal expertise for looking at some of our data, but not at the level that would help us determine if we should continue the project, if we should modify it in some way, or if we should literally abandon the project.
All right, and thanks to Dr. Cody for sharing that great overview. I did want to mention again that our chat feature is available if you'd like to send in a question or you have any thoughts or would like to interact with other participants. And I also wanted to mention that we are recording this so that we can distribute it later, so that if you want to share this with someone else or you have others who might be interested in this project or in building capacity through partnerships, you'll be able to share this with anyone you'd like. We'll be sure to send a link out to this to all registered participants once the editing has been completed after the video is finished. Okay, so our third step in this project, again we had 9 big steps, was in September 2014 to hold a workshop with Seminole County Public Schools district leadership and the data analysts to talk about considerations for their program rollout and data collection. So these are important thoughts to consider, and Dr. Cody referenced this in her video clip. But again, it's very important to think about what data do you have on hand, what data would you need if you really want to see if this is making a difference or not, and really thinking about not only the data but how to analyze that in the future as this project unfolded. So next up, we're going to hear from one of the data analysts about her role and her thoughts about the partnership with the REL Southeast.
My name is Caitlin Tripany. I'm a data analyst in assessment and accountability for Seminole County District Schools. I was responsible for the statistical analysis for the CARP-AD project that Seminole County collaborated with the REL. For the CARP-AD project, we chose to use a propensity score model to analyze the data, which involves a process of matching students in the treatment group with control students in order to find populations of students that or similar so that we can compare outcomes on the pre-assessment and the post-assessment. The REL Southeast staff introduced the method of propensity score matching to me and provided support on how to do the analysis and write the code necessary in order to complete the analysis. I'm still in the process of doing model specification and balancing for the propensity score matching, and it would be helpful in the future to talk with REL Southeast about kind of industry standards for what is considered significant and how well we can balance the model in order to be beneficial.
All right, thanks to Caitlin Tripany, who is the lead data analyst from Seminole County Public Schools working on this project. Again, I think it's great to get perspective from one of the data analyst partners that we work with in the district to talk about, exactly how we're able to support her in her role. And with that, we're going to move on and hear from one of our researchers, Dr. Adria Truckenmiller, who's a research methodologist here at the REL Southeast, who's going to talk about her perspective and role in this project.
My name is Dr. Adria Truckenmiller. I'm a researcher at the REL Southeast at Florida State University. So I had two roles in this project. I started out by meeting with the reading coaches and with the district staff in Seminole County to talk with them about some considerations they might have for a research project. They're looking at using their typical teaching practices and incorporating some new teaching practices. So what I did is help them think about how what they're doing in their classroom could relate to a research project. So mainly that's thinking about two different areas. So my second role was talking with them up front about setting up the research design and some things that you don't typically think about when you're implementing a new program or practice in your schools is having a comparison group. That's the hard part, coming up with what would be a good comparison group, especially naturalistically, that's already occurring and wouldn't disrupt your schools. So sometimes we have to think about ethically, if we have a practice that works very well, denying that practice to a control group is not necessarily ethical. So coming up with a control group that has some type of intervention being implemented in it to also compare to the new intervention or new practice that you're using. So that's number one, using your comparison groups, and number two is thinking about the data that you're going to collect to look at if your new practice was effective or not. So remembering to get a baseline data point, finding a baseline data point, identifying something that makes sense that you're already using within your school that might be helpful in targeting, it matches the target of your instruction or intervention. So we had these types of discussions about what pieces are important. So having a comparison group, identifying the right data piece. It was a really exciting conversation. The people that Seminole County brought into the room, they knew exactly who they needed in that room to talk about what data is available within the school and what they're really trying to do with their policy, which kids they wanted to target and why, and then identifying an equivalent group as their comparison group. I learned a lot watching the superintendent to the district staff. Having a person in the district office who understands data in more than a superficial manner. So having Caitlin on this project and others within the district office who all had the same goal, I really learned how effective that can be in getting something like this off the ground.
All right, and thank you to Dr. Adria Truckenmiller for providing some great insight into the researcher side of the role. And I did see the question that came up, how many were in the pilot? And when we go to another video clip, I have a file on my laptop that I'll get a specific number for you on. So I want to let you know, it'll take a minute, but when we head to the next video clip, I will definitely be able to look that up and provide a specific number. All right, so next up, in October of 2014, we conducted a workshop with district curriculum leaders and instructional coaches, and I was part of that workshop, to talk about research-based strategies for content area reading intervention. So looking at the NG-CARPD professional development that the Department of Education had developed, and providing a little more information about content area reading intervention strategies, looking at the What Works Clearinghouse practice guide for adolescent literacy, and some other materials that were available through IES, and sharing a little bit about the What Works Clearinghouse. Also, a workshop on using data to make instructional decisions for students in reading intervention, and then working with coaches on the research-based roles of reading coaches. So really trying to work with district staff and instructional coaches were an incredibly important part of this effort at the high schools. Really, they, again, were involved in developing an online version of the training, providing the training to the teachers, and supporting them as they rolled this training out in the classrooms at the high schools. So we're going to hear actually from one of the coaches who was involved in this project next, Dr. Tammy Stafford. So she'll talk a little bit about the role of the instructional coach and her partnership with REL Southeast staff.
I am Tammy Stafford. I'm an instructional coach at Lake Mary High School in Seminole County Schools. Okay, well, what we have done with CARPD is trained a few content area teachers, mostly in science, biology, chemistry, and social studies, world history and U.S. history for our 10th and 11th graders. And we've given them the CARPD strategies to utilize with their students in the CARPD program. The students in that program really are those who typically ride the line between proficient and non-proficient. Flip back and forth, should you say, that really need the experience or the practice with more complex text. Instructional coaches are really at the forefront of the high school supporting this initiative. They're being trained across the district to teach these classes to the teachers in a series of 150 hours. They also are the schedulers of these students, identifying the appropriate students for the program, identifying the appropriate teachers and classes for the program, and then, being the face, really the contact on the school level with instructional practices within the classroom. REL Southeast has had a couple of meetings with coaches to just really inform us on the best practices within NG-CARPD, what's really just been a good resource, for things that we have needed, resources that we have needed to keep the curriculum of the CARPD classes up to date.
So thanks to Dr. Stafford for providing some additional details about the support that coaches provided for this work. I think that, again, she mentioned they were an incredibly integral part of this, and certainly thank all of them for their hard work, along with the district research office and the other district leadership there. So in November of 2014, we held an additional workshop, and you'll hear from one of the researchers who worked on that in a second, that was focused on providing technical support to district staff and literacy coaches and developing classroom observation tools. And this researcher had been involved in a couple of other projects that had a lot of work with observation tools and using those classroom observations to support implementation for teachers that provided content area reading intervention, because that's an important part of a professional development rollout, is making sure that there's support as the rollout's going on, that there is support for implementation, that you're looking at what's occurring in the classroom and trying to make sure that you can support and help both, applaud the good efforts that are going on and support teachers who may, have more difficulties in embracing the strategies and rolling them out. But again, great job by the coaches, and we're going to hear now from one of the researchers who was very instrumental in that workshop and others. Okay, and this is Dr. Jessica Sidler-Folsom, who's a research methodologist here at the REL Southeast. Again, she's been involved in several different projects that involve observations and was involved in that specific workshop. She's going to talk a little bit about her role in building capacity.
I'm Dr. Jessica Sidler-Folsom. I'm a research methodologist at the Regional Educational Laboratory Southeast at Florida State University. So to build capacity, we worked with the coaches specifically and some district staff and did a lot of brainstorming sessions on what they would expect to see and what they would hope to see and what they would hope not to see if they did, if teachers actually implemented the professional development the way that they would want it to be implemented. And so through these open discussions, open conversations, we helped them develop a classroom observation tool. But that built the capacity so they could see the process that you go through to kind of identify what you would want to look for. And along the lines of that, we also help them take that information and put it into an easy format to use. So they now have the capacity to have the conversations, to create tools, and also how to look at existing tools and combine that with their brainstorming sessions of the content to be able to create their new tools. So what I really learned through this process is that by having a research practitioner partnership, that some of the barriers that exist when a researcher comes in are really kind of knocked down because the practitioners end up being less intimidated by what we're asking them to do. But more importantly, when we developed this classroom observation tool, the coaches felt ownership over it, and they felt more comfortable being able to explain it when they would go in to use it. So I think what I've really learned is how it makes the process actually easier when it's done as a partnership.
Excellent. Thanks to Jessica for that conversation. She did a great job talking about the benefits and a little bit about her role in that work. So we did receive a question that says that we thought it was a wonderful question. In a smaller district without a data analyst, the balance of the research work must shift back to the REL. What capacities would you help the district build in that situation? And Dr. Folsom's actually with us in the lab today and would like to address that question.
I think that's a really great question. Working with smaller districts and having a data analyst or people that are really familiar with research and have the capacity to build a study, that's a luxury for many, many districts. I think Seminole County is very fortunate to have that available. But that doesn't preclude a smaller district or a district that doesn't know how to do research or to really think about data in that sort of way. It doesn't preclude them from doing such a study. And the capacity that we can help build in those sort of situations is helping districts figure out how to phrase questions in ways that they can be researchable. One of the biggest barriers that we see is that districts, teachers, principals, whomever, they have these great questions, but how to really operationalize those questions in a way that it can be researched is really a challenge. And so that's one of the capacity building activities that we do. Frequently, one of our services is the Ask a REL, and we frequently get questions that aren't really written in a way that are researchable. So we actually work with the people that request or send us questions in to formulate them in such a way that's truly researchable. So that's one of the biggest ways to help build that capacity. And then once we help them understand what their question is, we can work with them to actually develop a research plan around that. And majority of the studies that we've actually done, that analysis really falls upon the REL. So this was a really interesting opportunity for us to really build the capacity within Seminole County, but I would say that's not necessarily the norm of what we do. So building the capacity to understand how to build those questions, how to reach out, how to use tools that are already available, those sort of things, because there's so much data that already exists that can be used to address questions, maybe not in the perfect sense, but they can at least be used to start to hone in on some ideas. So we do have the ability to build the capacity within smaller districts as well.
All right, thanks so much, Jessica. And hopefully that helped address your question, which again we thought was a great one. So with that, we may have another question or two coming up. We'll get back to those in a second, but we'll go ahead and move forward and then come back to questions when we have a moment. So our next step in March of 2015, just so this year, we held a workshop with the SCPS Research Office to talk about study design and data analysis. So now that, you know, the actual professional development had occurred and the strategies are being provided in the classroom, it was really time to start thinking about the data that was coming in through progress monitoring and then outcome measures at the end of the year. How would that be analyzed? So a workshop was held with the Seminole County Public Schools Research Office to talk about and discuss the study designs and data analysis And questions emerged from that research office about propensity score matching, which Caitlin mentioned a little bit earlier. So then in April, we held a workshop that focused on the development of a fidelity checklist. Now that, again, the PD had been delivered and strategies have been implemented for a while, how can we really look at and see what's going on, in the classroom and see if they are indeed their instructions aligning with the strategies that were provided in professional development. So we provided sample checklists that had been developed prior and worked with the Seminole County Public Schools coaches and district staff and looking through the NG CAR-PD program to see if a fidelity checklist could be developed to use in classrooms with students in those content area reading intervention classrooms. So again, we reviewed the components that were within the professional development with both our staff, the REL Southeast staff, and the SCPS staff, and then looked at samples of fidelity checklists to help develop an NG CAR-PD fidelity checklist by the district. So then in July, a workshop was held after the data was in to talk about details of data analysis using propensity score matching, including next steps in the final planning for the analysis. Then this fall, we've continued conversations with the district who's working to expand this to actually work with more high school students and middle school students to support the project, and we're actually looking at grant opportunities and other funding sources so that we can continue this partnership in the future in our sustainability plan. So again, this has been a very successful partnership. Those are the steps that were entailed in this partnership, but these are also steps, again, more broadly that you'd want to think about if you're developing a sustainable partnership between researchers and practitioners. Because you may have one funding source, but that source may end, and you have to start thinking about if we're going to sustain this. Travel is involved, people's time is involved. How can we continue this? So thinking about other funding sources, thinking about ways that you can sustain and continue and even build on the partnership in the future. So with this, we wanted to start thinking about, now that we've kind of covered some of the basic concepts of this specific project, we wanted to think from this project, what are some specific or potential difficulties or challenges that might be faced between researchers and practitioners? So, we asked that question. We posed it for people both in the district, our practitioners in the district, and then our researchers on REL staff. So we're going to share with you a few thoughts from participants in this project to see what they thought about potential difficulties and thoughts on how they might be even broached in researcher-district partnership.
Some difficulties in the researcher-practitioner relationship would be just communication. Sometimes it's difficult to get everybody in the room and on the same page in order to get the work done.
Some of the difficulties include expectations for gathering data that will be explicit in determining a causal relationship. In the real world of school, everything can't be as precise as researchers may want it and justifiably hope that it would be. So it's important to find a partner that understands what practitioners deal with, and that is that student populations change. Sometimes metrics are only one piece of information about a student, and so you do include students who may not fit an exact profile. There's a wide range of teacher implementation based on training that's done, and there's also subjectivity when you're thinking about how teachers implement in the classroom.
I think sometimes it's working with researchers and, in schools at the same time can be a little tricky because research, we like for it to be very, very clean. We like for the methodology to be very clean. In perfect world scenario, in the school sometimes it's not such a perfect world scenario. We have students who move around, we have teachers who move around, we have different levels of expertise, across the board with teachers, instructional coaches, administration, with everybody. And then of course the shifts and the moving around make things more difficult. Keeping the fidelity of the research protocol and design can be difficult sometimes with our schedules and again different instructional plans within the content areas. Our time constraints that we have on our end.
One of the difficulties can just be in general if teachers or practitioners, district staff might be a little intimidated by the research process. They may see us coming in as outsiders, and so developing a partnership with them is key. So they see us not as partners rather than as outsiders. And so the challenge could be just building that rapport and having them realize that most of us that come in, at least through this project, come in as former practitioners, and not just as a researcher that's coming in that's from the ivory tower.
It's often difficult to get everybody in a district on the same page. There's a lot of things happening in a school district, a lot of things that they need to pay attention to as administrators. So getting the schools, especially in a large school district, getting enough schools on board, and Seminole County did that miraculously, from the superintendent to the district staff to individual principals to the reading coaches, all having the same vision for what they want to do moving forward can often be the #1 barrier, and Seminole County did an amazing job of setting that up beforehand, so the researchers really didn't have a whole lot to have to work through with them, which was pretty amazing.
Excellent, thanks. And I think it's helpful to think about and hear from others about the potential difficulties that you can, face when you're establishing this kind of capacity building partnership. Okay, so next, of course, we want to talk about the benefits. So we asked similar questions about what the benefits are of researcher-district partnerships, so we're going to hear from some of our colleagues and participants in this project about that.
Some of the benefits of a researcher-practitioner relationship are expanding, especially in my role as a data analyst, is expanding my skills with statistic practices that I may have not learned in my studies in college, but have been recently used in the research that will be beneficial to the schools in determining whether or not our interventions are being implemented successfully.
There are numerous benefits being involved in a researcher-district partnership. First, the relationship that you have with the experts at usually a university level, or in this case the Florida Center for Reading Research, provide a lot of opportunity for insights into interventions that district staff may not be aware of. They've worked with other partnerships, and they bring that rich background information to the table. We also have an opportunity to discuss how we're looking at data and how we're using data. And again, they bring different perspectives that help us determine whether or not what we're doing is going to have an effect or has had an effect on the students that we're working with. We hope that in the future we'll have some opportunities to share how these types of projects can be broadcast on a greater level, because obviously we're learning a lot through a partnership that we have with the REL laboratory, but we know others are throughout the country, and we want to learn what they're doing too. So we think it's a great way to improve our knowledge and to improve how we're using what others are doing to help students achieve.
I think the best way for us to use research in our schools is to help us identify where certain strategies and programs can benefit our kids the most.
There's many benefits to that. I think for the practitioners, for the teachers, for the districts, is that they learn how to do research, so they build the capacity to do that. One of the benefits for the researcher is that we're designing studies and helping practitioners design studies that are going to meet their goals. So it creates research that's driven by the end user, that's driven by the goals of the practitioner, rather than a researcher coming in with their own agenda. So essentially this is bridging the research to practice gap.
I think education in general improves as a field as the two work together, as researchers and schools work together, because the schools can really identify what they're interested in seeing improved or changing, and researchers, of course, can then benefit greatly from knowing what to look for and knowing what to work with schools on. So it works out mutually.
Perfect, and thanks to all of our participants who really shared some great insight into not only this specific project, but more broadly, again, how researcher-practitioner partnerships may be beneficial, and again, some of the difficulties that may be faced in creating and supporting these kind of partnerships. Jessica and I wanted to go back to one question that came up earlier about the evaluation system used for teachers, and thanks so much to Jackie Cahill from Seminole County for providing a response and noting that the Marzano model is the model that they use for teacher evaluations. The project that we worked with them on, developing a fidelity checklist and observation tool, was not an evaluative tool at all. It was something to use again, just to look at what was going on in the classroom, and Jessica's been involved in other projects that are similar.
Yeah, one of the biggest concerns whenever we say, let's do classroom observations, or let's have a checklist, or a fidelity, or something like that, is that all of a sudden people get weary or leery of it, thinking that they're going to be evaluated, and this is somehow going to be tied into their evaluations or their pay or something like that. And we make it very, very clear that nothing that we're doing is evaluative of them as a teacher, but it's evaluative of how they're responding to the professional development that they have received. So we really liken it towards progress monitoring that you do with students, where you're trying to make sure that your instruction is being effective. So this is progress monitoring for the professional development that's been received to see if it's effective in terms of what's going on in the classroom. So we just wanted to clarify that for the question, what teacher evaluation is used in Seminole, that with this project, we were not using a teacher evaluation tool. It was a checklist of teaching practices related to the NG CARPD.
That's a great response. Thanks, Jessica. So we wanted to, again, you've been great about providing questions as we go through this, but we wanted to provide a little bit of time. If you have any questions, we have a few moments left, and we would love to take any further questions that you may have about this project, or how, broadening not just this project, but in general, researcher-practitioner partnerships. As I mentioned, this is one specific example. It was a great example. We have other wonderful projects going on with practitioners out in the field as well. And I really like a couple of the quotes that came in that, most of us who work in the research area, many of us came from a teaching background initially, and just creating those partnerships and creating the relationships with folks out in the district and in state offices so that you can really build capacity, so that you can talk about instruction, I think is beneficial. So looking at the next question that came in, and thanks for the question, are there plans for longitudinal study of the students in the initial group? Will the treatment be continued, and will data be collected during the 10th grade year? So looking at this project, yes, Seminole County is planning to continue this project into this school. They have continued into this school year and actually are looking to broaden it potentially to middle schools. I know that we've had conversations with Caitlin about continuing to to analyze the data, and I know there's interest in that. And from our end, again, we're very glad to build support and continue to support this project, and are actually, as I said, looking at funding models so that we can continue the partnership as the REL cycle goes through the 5th and final year, as we can look for other funding sources and continue the partnership in other ways. So what did we find with the 10th grade rates for those students? And again, I know that the analysis of the data is continuing, and as Dr. Griffin said in the initial video, he feels that this project's helped actually build student engagement and interest in their coursework. What he mentioned on the outset is that students who are required to be in an intervention course often, want to take an elective. I know I've been part of that project, formerly working in a school in a district. It's a challenge. So he feels strongly that it's helped improve engagement in the high school with students. And again, we're talking about students who are right on the edge of proficiency. So what was the impact on student outcome data? What was the difference in this group? And again, on our end, there's not a published report that we're putting out from the REL. We work with the district on conducting the data analysis, but this is really our product from this, is talking about the partnership. And we did complete a report that just provided the details on how the partnership was created. We did talk with them. Adria, who was in one of the videos before, did mention that there are, they actually gave them some examples of publications that they may want to publish their results in. but because we built capacity and really supported them in this effort, we're not reporting out anything specifically in terms of outcomes from the REL, because it's really their project that we supported. Hopefully that makes sense, but that was really our role, was to support them in conducting this project. And if anyone from Seminole County, again, they would be glad, I'm sure, to provide details if any have been moved forward, if they have thought about doing publications. But in our work, we have worked with them to start looking at grant opportunities that we potentially could publish from in the future as well. So hopefully that was helpful. Are there any further questions? All right, well, we thank you. And again, just wanted to provide an example, and I know this is of great interest, and across RELs, we've heard that, and certainly working with other partnerships.
Oh, that's a great question. We have 14 researchers in our district who are doing individual classroom projects. What type of support can REL provide?
Well, that's great. Well, I'll start by asking, what region are you in? This is for Marie
Rogers. If you are in, well, obviously you're in the States, so contacting in Tampa, okay, so you are in our region.
Great.
Fantastic.
So I know Lynn Dougherty Underwood and have been, involved in work with her. If you'd like to reach out, if you go on to the next slide. Perfect. My email address is listed there. Feel free to reach out. We would love to work with you. Our website's there as well. Feel free to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to follow up and put you in touch with some of our wonderful researchers that we have here on staff. Thanks so much. I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. And like I said, feel free to reach out and send an email. And, we love working with districts all over our region, and Hillsborough has been a great partner for the Florida Center for Reading Research and the REL also. We've had a couple of projects that we've conducted with Hillsborough. So feel free to reach out, and we'd love to work with you. And again, Seminole County has been a great partner as well.
One of the places to also jump off from that, if you are not in Tampa, Florida, and not in Hillsborough, and you don't have a Lynn available to you, is contacting us through the Ask a REL feature. That's an excellent way, and that's on the website, the rel-se.fcrr.org. Go to the Ask a REL and submit a question through there, and that's a great way to get the ball rolling on getting some preliminary answers through the question.
Good. I do want to say, I know I mentioned that we're not actually publishing a report on the findings of this study. There are other studies we're engaged with that we are publishing reports on. So this specific example is just a capacity, and I don't want to say just, it was a wonderful capacity building project that we're not publishing a report on, but we do have many other studies that we are publishing reports on and we'll have findings for. So I think that's a good distinction to make.
And all of those reports that have been published already or in process can be located on our website as well.
That's a great point. All right, we'll email, yes, ASAP, excellent. Oh, Rock Lake, excellent. So in Rock Lake Middle School in Seminole County, they're seeing a real benefit in their classrooms. I'd love to hear that. So again, they have moved forward working with middle schools in Seminole County, and we're already starting to, again, qualitatively see some results with their teachers and their students. And that's what we heard just from the first year of implementation. I heard that from teachers I know, from coaches, that they felt qualitatively, just through conversations, anecdotally, they really felt that they were having some positive results, and the district staff felt the same way. So, that's always a great place to start. And through their data analysis, again, they feel good enough about their progress that they have expanded the project. And again, I can't share results with you, but I can say they have felt good enough about the data that they have that they've expanded the project. That I can feel safe to say. So that's wonderful to hear. Well, we are right at 11:55, and if you have any other questions, feel free to submit them now. And don't forget, there'll be a survey that comes up as soon as we complete the webinar. That if you don't mind, again, it's not required, but we always love to get feedback to see how we can do this better. We just really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and We'll be glad. Again, feel free to send an email my way, visit our website. As Jessica mentioned, the Ask a REL feature. We'll be more than happy to, be in touch with you, and we love building these partnerships, and we'd love to reach out and hear from other districts that we can work with. So with that, we'll go ahead, I guess, and wrap up. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email. With that, we just thank you again for being involved in this webinar, and we will record it again, or we did record it. We'll edit that and send a link out to all the participants so that you receive a version that you can share with others. All right, well, have a wonderful day and happy holidays. And again, you'll be hearing from us again soon. Thank you.